Hi, my name is Hi. Hi, my name is Tanisha Kaiser and welcome to my true crime YouTube channel. Today we'll be discussing a serial killer who murdered a total of 10 people. His name is Stewart Wilken, also known as Boetie Boer, which means brother farmer. So that's like an Afrikaans nickname, Boetie Boer. But in this video, I'll be referring to him as Stewart Wilken. Okay, so before I begin, I just want to inform you of some trigger warnings that will definitely be coming up in this case. This is an extremely disturbing case. It's really intense. And I'm just going to read the list so that I don't miss anything. I'll be talking about child abuse, child neglect, rape, sodomy, bestiality, bullying, pedophilia, necrophilia, cannibalism, and attempted suicide. I hope I've included everything, but just know that this case is completely deranged, and if you don't feel like you can handle this type of heavy case, I would suggest that you skip this video. Next week there will be a new one, and hopefully that will be more suitable to you. And we're gonna begin. Before we talk about the actual murders that he committed, I'm gonna talk about his childhood. Stewart was born on the 11th of November in 1966 in Boksburg, South Africa. And when Stewart was just 6 months old, him and his 2-year-old sister were actually abandoned in a telephone booth by their biological mother. They were later found by a domestic worker. So a domestic worker is like a housekeeper, so someone that cleans the house. They were found by a domestic worker, and this domestic worker decided to take the 2 babies to their employee. And this man's name was Doop. So Doop decided to take the 2 kids in, and he was now going to be their caregiver. But unfortunately for Stewart, he would experience a whole range of different types of abuse under Doop's care. So some of that being, Doop would burn Stewart with cigarette butts on his genitals. Like, I've heard of people burning their kids with cigarette butts, which is a horrible thing to do, but on his genitals, like not just burning him on the arm, on a 6-month-old's private parts. That was just like, that was shocking to me. And it gets worse. Doop would force Stewart to eat his meal with the dogs out of their dog bowl. So the dogs would be eating, no? And then Stewart has to eat out of the dog bowl with the dogs. Sick, sick, sick. And it gets worse. Now, this is really bad. I mean, that's bad, but this is. So Doop would perform bestiality with his dogs, so he would have sex with his dogs, and then he would force Stewart to lick his penis afterwards. I've watched a lot of true crime, but I've never ever heard of anything like that before, and that's disturbing, that is disgusting, that is vile. Stewart's sister, though, during this time, he didn't know what happened to her. He just said that she disappeared. We will talk about it a little bit later on, but from Stewart's perspective, during this time, she just disappeared, so we don't know what happened to her yet, okay? This abuse continued until Stewart was 2 years old, and at this time, Doop's next door neighbors, the Wilkens, noticed that Stewart was severely neglected. So they decided, okay, they are going to adopt Stewart. Great, amazing, godsend, yay. They adopt Stewart, and when they took him in, they were the ones that confirmed the abuse that happened to Stewart. So that's what I was just saying now. They were the ones that confirmed the abuse that happened to Stewart. Stewart was infested with lice and severely malnourished. By the time they adopted Stewart, he was actually calling himself Boetie Boer. So it was Doop that gave Stewart that nickname, and it was the Wilkens that named Stewart Wilken. So, okay, great. Stewart has a new family. They take the boy in, and they decide to move to Port Elizabeth, which is now known as Quebec. I know I'm not saying that right, and I am so sorry, but I can't say it. I've tried. We try. We go on. As Stewart got older, things weren't really that much better for him, even though he was in like this new environment, new town, new parents. But unfortunately, Stewart never really adjusted and adapted and became better. Stewart performed poorly at school. He did really, really terribly. I'm saying that like he did really bad, like really bad. He failed grade 3 times. Socially, things weren't better for him. He didn't really have any friends. The kids at school would make fun of him for being adopted. So socially, things weren't really that great for him either. So one specific day, he was in school and the teacher's there. I don't know if they're at break or in class, but the teacher's there. And the students start making fun of Stewart. And they're making fun of Stewart, calling him names. I don't know how they're making fun of him, but they were making fun of him. And the teacher, instead of stopping this, just encouraged the students. I guess, make fun of him. Make fun of him. Instead of stopping the situation, just egg them on. The next day, Stewart came back and he assaulted the teacher. They don't say what he did to the teacher, they just said that he assaulted the teacher. So that's not great. Stewart was having a rough time at home too, but not because his parents were bad parents, it's because he was extremely badly behaved. Stewart would bite his adoptive mom, like bite her, and he would be punished by being locked up in his room. And when he was locked up in his room, then he would kick over the furniture and destroy things. Stewart also recalled that his mother would lock him up in a cupboard as punishment, which is not great. I don't like that one. He would also be punished for wetting the bed. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but they do say that one of the indications of a future violent offender is bedwetting, along with a series of other things like violent behavior, abuse towards animals, or violent behavior towards animals. So bedwetting does form part of the story, but he would be punished for bedwetting. So he would be punished. His home life wasn't going great either. So basically all aspects of his life were just going poorly. There was an incident at school where a student attacked Stewart, and Stewart retaliated. He fought back and he defended himself, and he was the one that ended up being punished and sent home from school. And when he got home, he tells his mom, like, "Mom, I got into this fight, and then this kid fought me, and then I fought back, and then I was sent home, and that's not fair." And his mom ended up not believing him. And it was from this day on that Stewart decided, and this is a quote, that he would be his own mother, father, sister, and auntie. I don't know why auntie, but auntie. He decided that he was going to take care of himself from this point forward. Okay. At age 8, Stewart started smoking weed. So I guess it's like self-medicating. I don't have a problem with people smoking weed, like, you do your thing, but 8 years old, no, you can't be smoking weed, okay? And when Stewart was 9 years old, a deacon from his church invited him to his house after Sunday school. So Stewart, trusting this adult from the church, goes home with the deacon, and the deacon actually ended up sodomizing Stewart. I couldn't find any information on whether Stewart told anyone about this, but I don't think that he did. Like, there's nothing stating that his parents knew or anything like that. So I don't know if he ever told anyone about this until now, when he is coming out with what happened to him as a child. In that same year, his adoptive father, Mr. Wilken, passed away. So this is a really, he's what, 9 years old? He's 9 years old, and he's been through so much, and now he's losing his adoptive dad. So now it's just him and his mom, and his mom is struggling. Stewart's behavior is just getting worse and worse. To be fair, we're talking about a child, Stewart as a child, not Stewart in the future. After everything that he's been through, I don't know how else you would expect this child to behave. Like, I just think that if he maybe had gotten psychological help, because when kids are behaving badly, it's for a reason, you know? Like they need help, they need psychological help. But instead, that's just my opinion, but instead his mother ended up sending Stewart to a reformatory because she couldn't handle him anymore. It was too much for her. I mean, her husband just passed away, her adopted child is just behaving so badly, it was too much for her. So she sends him to this reformatory. Now, a reformatory, let me see. A reformatory is a correctional institution for the treatment, training, and social rehabilitation of young offenders. So obviously she meant for Stewart to go here and better himself, have some discipline, to help with his bad behavior. Unfortunately, this wasn't any better for Stewart. Stewart would get locked up without his clothes as punishment, and when he was in this vulnerable state, the other students would end up sodomizing him. I mean, now, it just gets worse and worse for him. He tried to run away from this institute, or the reformatory, multiple times, but he always had to go back. Finally, in grade 11, he enlists in the army. Great, goes off to the army. Unfortunately, shortly after he enlisted, he was discharged for attempting suicide. I mean, is that not the biggest cry for help? Is this not? But you know what? This was, the 70s, the 80s at this stage. So it's kind of like, what do you expect? It's not like mental health was the most important thing in South Africa at that time. But anyway, so after this suicide attempt, Stewart moved back in with Mrs. Wilken in a place called Despatch, which is still close to Port Elizabeth, so in the surrounding areas. And when Stewart now turns 19 years old, he's in the club, he's out, and he sees this woman. Her name is Lynn. They lock eyes, they fall in love, and it's a thing. It's a grande thing. Okay, they're together, and in 1985, they have a daughter, and they name her Wuan. It was during this time they got married at some point. It didn't say when they got married, but okay, they married, they have their daughter Wuan, living happy, la-di-da-di-da, but this didn't last long. After Wuan was born, Lynn complained that Stewart only wanted to have anal sex in purposely, well, I don't think she thought maybe purposely, but in uncomfortable positions. So he wanted it to be uncomfortable. Now, this is just my opinion and my thoughts on it, because I've read that serial killers often fantasize about their murders and about victimizing someone years and years before they actually start committing the crimes. So I think during this time, while he was having this uncomfortable, I'm using air quotes because I don't know why, let me not. During these uncomfortable sex acts, or uncomfortable for Lynn, he was actually starting to act out his fantasies. He enjoyed the fact that she was in pain and uncomfortable. And I think that this is where he was starting to become a danger. He was now acting on his urges. That's just my opinion on it. Just because I've read that, like how serial killers, they fantasize for years and years and years before they even commit a crime. Which is also why I don't feel sorry for them, or I don't believe that they don't have control over what they're doing, because they know about what their thoughts are years before they actually commit these crimes. Like, they know what they're doing. So this insanity pleas and I'm mentally unwell, I'm like, but you knew that you were unwell, so why didn't you seek help? Like, is it better to keep that to yourself and murder, or to go to an institution or a doctor and be like, listen, something's happening, I know it's not normal because that person there doesn't have these urges. They don't do these things. They don't think these things, you know? Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent again, but that's my thoughts on that. Like, Wilken alleged that Lynn turned to sex work. I don't know if this is true, but he does use this to later explain his crimes. I don't know, I just don't believe it. I just doubt it. Stewart was working. He was a fisherman by trade, so I don't know if they like really needed the money, or I just don't understand why you would be married to someone and then turn to sex work, and then your husband is also resenting you for turning to sex work. It doesn't make sense, the overall thing. But anyway, this is what Stewart alleged. Lynn turned to sex work. So let's just continue as if this is the truth. Stewart and Lynn had a very unhappy marriage, and Stewart would often physically abuse Lynn. And eventually she did phone the police to come and arrest him, but that was for smoking weed. And Stewart and Lynn eventually got divorced, and Stewart vowed that he would never have sex with a white woman again, out of fear that it could be his long lost sister. I don't know, whatever. This led him to later on meeting this new woman. Her name is Veronica, and Veronica had 2 sons from a previous relationship. Great. And Veronica was a colored woman. Now, let me just explain what colored means in this context, because I know in other parts of the world this could be seen as a derogatory term. So let me just, it's a derogatory term in other places of the world, but in South Africa it is seen as a race. So let's just talk about that. Okay, so colored, I'm just going to give you the Google version. Colored, formerly Cape Colored, is a person of mixed European and African or Asian ancestry as officially defined by the South African government from 1950 to 1991. Individuals assigned to this classification originated primarily from the 18th and 19th century unions between men of higher and women of lower social groups, for instance, between white men and slave women, or between slave men and Khoikhoi or San women. The slaves were from Madagascar, Malayan Archipelago, Sri Lanka, and India. I don't know if I said archipelago correctly, but anyway, I just thought it's important to just say what this means in a South African context. There's someone walking past. I'm so shy. This is the time that people like walk their dogs and stuff, and I'm sitting here with the ring light. It's I don't know, it's not embarrassing, it's just like, don't look, I'm busy. Anyway, I thought it's important to explain what a South African colored person means in the context of the story. So it's not a derogatory term in South Africa, it's just like being black or white. And I understand that in different parts of the world that it has a different meaning. So just in this context, it's just a racial group, okay? So Stewart and Veronica, they meet, fall in love, and they decide to get married. Unfortunately, this marriage didn't go well either. And Veronica's parents actually ended up accusing Stewart of sodomizing her 2 sons. And I believe that. I believe that happened. But anyway, move on. It was at this time that Stewart was like, I've had enough. He left Veronica, he left the home, and he decided to move to Happy Valley. Still nearby, but different area. And this is where Stewart would commit his first murder. So here we begin with Stewart's murders. Stewart met 15-year-old Montefico, and he took him to a secondary school, primary school. He took him to a primary school, and here he sodomized and strangled Montefico. Again, in 1990, Stewart had an argument with his wife Veronica. So the two of them, they're still married, but they separated. So he's at the house, they have an argument, he's pissed off and he darts off and he's like, I don't need this, and he goes and he looks for a sex worker. And this is when he met 25-year-old Virginia Huisman. He solicited her. He took her to a primary school where they first engaged in consensual sex. Fine. And then he started to have anal sex with her. And she started to complain. She's like, I'm in pain. Stop. I don't like this. And this triggered Stewart. And he started to strangle her. And it was actually this act of strangling her that caused him to ejaculate. He left her body in the schoolyard. On the 10th of January 1991, Stewart met another sex worker. Her name was Marcia Pappenfuss, and she was 37 years old. He met her at the Red Lion Hotel. They meet, chats going, and he solicits her and he takes her to St. George Park. Before they engage in any sexual interaction, Marcia says, I want my money. Can I have my money? And this triggered Stewart. He flew into a rage and he strangled her. And he ended up sodomizing her dead body. So now Stewart is a rapist, a murderer, and a necrophile. So like I was talking about earlier, firstly we see a pattern emerge. As soon as the victim asserts power, asks for money, complains, asserts themselves in any way, this angers Stewart. He doesn't want them to be assertive. He essentially wants a submissive person. I want to say submissive, but submissive isn't the right word. He wants a dead body. He doesn't want the person to fight back. He doesn't want the person to say anything at all, actually. He wants to be in control, in power, right? And then what I was talking about, I just want to mention this, that he has been perfecting this act, this crime, for years now. He's been fantasizing about it, and every time his victim asserts themselves, they break that fantasy. They are crushing, they like the it's like the mirror is breaking or the glass is breaking. What's it? I don't know what you say, but it's ruining his fantasy. He doesn't want his victim to talk back, and angers him so much to the point that he kills him. And then he has his perfect fantasy of this person that's not talking back to him. You know, that's not really an opinion. This is more based off the things that I was reading from the psychologist that gave testimony in his case. That's more what I'm giving you there. In 1991, on the 21st of January, so just 11 days after his previous murder, Stewart met a 14-year-old homeless boy who he allegedly solicited. He takes the boy to St. George's Park. Also, his previous victim was also at St. George's Park, and this victim asked for his money. And again, this enraged Stewart, he was triggered, and he flew into a rage. He strangled the boy, sodomized the boy, and this caused him to ejaculate. So we can also see that the act of strangulation, the act of silencing his victim, gets him off, for lack of a better word or a better phrase. Sorry. In 1993, between June and September, Stewart met another homeless boy. He took him to Kloof Street, and here he would sodomize and strangle the boy, and he left his body in a ravine. In 1995, on the 27th of July, Stewart solicited another sex worker. Her name was Georgina Boniswa Zweni, and she was 42 years old. He took her to Prince Alfred Park, where he would strangle and sodomize her. But this wasn't the end of it for him. He was still, quote, filled with lust and rage, and he assaulted her dead body with a knife. The pathologist testified that the wound was star-shaped, and he had stabbed her vagina 15 times. He stabbed her next to her navel 5 times. He wasn't done there. He also cut off her nipples and external genitalia, and he ate them at the scene. He didn't stop there. He also inserted his hand into her vagina, into her womb, and tried to pull her insides out. He was sick. Like, he was, and I don't mean just like, oh, he was mentally, like, he was disturbed, severely disturbed, to do something like this. Like, she's already passed away, and now you are going to not just defile, but you are mutilating her body. Like, this is just an extreme level of hatred. Like, he must have really hated. He said he hated sex workers. He hated sex workers. Hated because of his wife that turned to sex work. I don't know. In the same year, Stewart would end up merging again. On the 29th of September, Stewart went to visit his ex-wife Lynn. So remember, the two of them, they still have a daughter together, Wuan. So obviously he would still keep in touch. I mean, he is Wuan's father, so he would go and visit. So on this particular day, Stewart went to visit, right? And it was said, so Lynn remarried, right? So she had a new husband and he had a child. So this is her stepdaughter. And this stepdaughter recalls seeing Stewart and Wuan sitting about 150 meters away from the house on the side of the curb, chatting like father and daughter, you know. And Stewart alleged that Wuan confided in him that her new stepdad was molesting her, and there were times that there was not enough food in the house. Wuan's stepsister did admit that her dad didn't necessarily like the girls, but there was no mention of anything about them being molested by him or abused by him. She also did confirm that this was sometimes not enough food in the house, but again, at no point did she say that her dad actually molested them. Anyway, so this is just what Stewart alleged that Wuan told him. Stewart is a sneaky little guy. I think he's just, just saying things so that it sounds like what he did makes sense, right? Okay. On the 29th of September was the last time that Wuan was seen alive. So that time when she was sitting outside with her dad, that was the last time she was seen alive ever again. Stewart ended up taking his daughter to Happy Valley. So he actually kidnapped her, and then he took her to Happy Valley where he lived, and he said there was a garden there filled with fairy tale like figures such as gnomes. Okay. And Stewart played there as a child, and this was some of his happiest memories there in this garden. It was here that Stewart decided to inspect Wuan's vagina and found that she was no longer a virgin. He decided that he wanted to save her from the same life that he had growing up, being sexually abused, and he decided to strangle her in an effort to send her soul to God. He makes me so angry. He kept her body and he removed her clothes, and he would sleep next to her body until it was extremely decomposed. When the body was too decomposed, he took her skeletal remains and he left it behind a Holiday Inn. It will come up again, and he covered her body with a tarp, and then he would place the clothes that he removed from her body next to him as if she was still there. So he was just sleeping next to the clothes of his dead daughters. Yeah. He denied having any sexual interaction with Wuan, or before or after she passed away. But because of the way that he had treated his former victims, you know, but he denies having any sexual interaction with her before or after she passed away. When Buan was found, her body was too decomposed to actually prove whether she was sexually assaulted or not. So we can't even confirm whether she was sexually molested by her stepfather or by Stewart. In 1996, 22-year-old Katrina Claassen was solicited by Stewart. He took her down to the beach, where he put a piece of plastic down her throat to stop her from screaming, and he strangled and sodomized her. Same story, like he got away with this for so long. And it was also said, and I actually didn't include this because I read this after I wrote all the research down, before I put the story together, he would watch the police when they were doing the investigations. If they would find a body, he would actually like hang around the crime scene or nearby to see what police was looking for, so that he could do better on his next crime. So if they found a piece of evidence, then he would know, okay, next time remember not to do that. So he was a student. Like, he made this his life. This is an art to him. He is disgusting. Between May and August of 1996, cheers, he's busy. 1996, Stewart met another homeless child. He took him to Fort Frederick, where the boy masturbated him. That's how they phrased it, so I'm just quoting them. Masturbated him, and he then forced the boy to undress, and he sodomized him. This boy threatened to tell the police, and Stewart ended up strangling him, obviously, although it is believed that Stewart would have ended up murdering the boy, whether he threatened to tell the police or not, and he ended up hiding the body. So on the 22nd of January 1997, Stewart would commit his final crime. Okay, so Henry Baker, right? Henry Baker's mother is the ex-girlfriend of Stewart. Stewart even spent a few nights on Ellen's mother's couch, right? So when he was having difficulties in his marriage with Veronica, I'm assuming it's Veronica because this is like that's the latest marriage, then he would go and spend the night at Ellen's mother's house, right? And at some point, Ellen and Stewart, they had a thing. They were dating, but now they were exes. So Henry was not a stranger to Stewart. Okay, that's important information, right? So now, one day, Henry's at home with his mom, Ellen. Mommy, I'm going to the park. And Henry goes off to the park. And Ellen wasn't worried. Everyone kind of knows everyone in the area, you know. And her mother lived like right down the road. So Henry's like, okay, I'm going to go to the park. I'll see you later. Henry goes to the park. He's playing with a friend. And this friend says, look, I'm going to go buy milk for the house. And then I'm going to come back. The friend goes to the shop, comes back, and he sees that Henry is talking with this older guy, Stewart. And he sees the two of them are now walking away. And he's like, hey, where you guys going? And Stewart tells this boy, it's none of your business. The two of them go off, and Henry was never seen again. Okay, now we go back to the house. Ellen is at home. She hasn't seen Henry for a few hours, but she's not concerned because he usually, if he doesn't come home, then he goes to his grandma's house, who's down the road. She's not worried. She's like, whatever, it's fine. I'll call or I'll see them later, it's fine. 2 days go by, and she still hasn't heard or seen from Henry. She hasn't seen him. She hasn't heard from him. She's like, yo, where is this child? She goes to her mother's house, and she's like, hey, where's Henry? And they're like, what are you talking about? Henry wasn't here. She's like, oh no, my son is missing. They contact the Child Protective Unit, and Sergeant Ursula Barnett gets on the case. She goes and she starts investigating. She speaks to this friend that last saw Henry, and the friend tells Sergeant Ursula Barnett that the last time he saw Henry, he was with this man named Stewart, and Stewart lives in the area. Everybody, like I said, everybody knows each other. No, he was with Stewart the last time I saw him. There she goes. She's like, okay, Stewart. The only problem with this is that Stewart didn't have a permanent address. So they didn't know where to find Stewart. But fine, they're going to keep looking for Stewart. And in the meantime, she's going to continue investigating. Who is Stewart? What's happened here? Continue with the investigation. And through this time, she finds out from her colleagues that Stewart's daughter, Wuan, actually went missing the year before, and she's never been found. She's still missing. She also finds that Stewart's wife's parents accused him of sodomizing her 2 boys. So now this is looking really bad. This is looking like Stewart is a really, really bad guy, which you and I know, but they don't know this yet. Not only did Wuan just go missing, the last person that Wuan was seen with was Stewart. So this is all looking really bad for Henry, because the last person, Wuan missing, sodomy charges, Henry, young boy, missing. This is not looking good, and things are becoming more urgent. And on the 28th of January 1997, Stewart is arrested. They got him. They start questioning Stewart, and he is concerned. He's worried. He's like, oh no, not Henry, because remember, he knows who Henry is. He knows his mother. So Stewart's like, he's concerned, gives up all this information, gives an alibi, stating that he was at a lady friend's house the night of Henry's disappearance. They're like, oh, well, Stewart looks genuinely concerned. He has an alibi. So they release him. Before checking out his alibi, they release him. Obviously, alibi turns out to be false. Stewart luckily is very quickly rearrested, but not quickly enough. We'll find out just now. So on the 31st of January, Stewart is rearrested. Now, they are pretty sure it's Stewart because his alibi is fake. Why did he lie? He was the last person seen with Henry. So, Now, the Child Protective Unit decides to approach Sergeant Derek Norsworthy of the Murder and Robbery Unit. This man is a goat. He was trained by Dr. Nikki Pistorius. I'm just going to read this. She's South Africa's first psychological profiler in the investigation of serial murderer, and this included advanced techniques in interviewing and interrogation. She's the goat, and he has been trained by her, Sergeant Derek Norsworthy. So this is where Sergeant Norsworthy's, sorry, it's a difficult one for me. Sergeant Norsworthy's training comes in, right? He brings Stewart into his office, not like a holding cell, doesn't go into the holding cell, doesn't go into like a, what do you call it, like a room where they talk to criminals. No, he brings him, but brings him into his office. Stewart walks in and he introduces himself as, I'm Boetie Boer. Okay, and he has a seat. Right in front of him is a picture of Sergeant Norsworthy's child, his daughter, around the same age as Wuan. Well, the same age she was, right? And Stewart immediately notices it, and he becomes fixated on this image of this young girl, which reminds him of his daughter. During this time, Sergeant Norsworthy is, pointing to his certificate on the wall that says that he has been successfully trained as a investigator in serial homicide, right? He's like referring to this, and Stewart like pays attention for a second, but then his attention is reverted back to this image of this young girl. And Sergeant Norsworthy says to Stewart, I know that you murdered Henry and Wuan. I also know that you go back to the bodies to commit necrophilia. And Stewart is silent. He reaches out his hands and he says, I'm sick. So I don't know if he did that, or if he's like, I'm sick, or whatever, you know, he's like, I'm sick. And it was right then and there that he admitted to murdering Henry and Wuan. Like the picture of the girl, I've been trained and I know what you did. And he's like, yes, I did it. Stewart's reign has now come to an end, and he's done committing crimes, and this is now, he starts spilling the beans. According to Stewart, he saw Henry in a park and approached Henry, and Henry allegedly asked him about sex. I don't believe that for a second, but okay. And he took Henry to the outskirts of Alcoa Park. It was here that he told Henry to remove his clothes, and he performed fellatio on the young boy. He then told Henry to lie on his back, and he ended up sodomizing Henry, and Henry protested and cried, and this is when Stewart started to strangle him, and he ejaculated as he was strangling the boy. And Stewart's reasoning, Stewart alleged that Henry was being physically abused by his parents and wanted to do the same thing to Henry that he had done for Wuan, and he wanted to send his soul to God. Oh, this man, sick. Henry's parents said that they never abused Henry. They would scold him, or they would like spank him on his bottom, but they didn't kick him. So Stewart alleged that they would kick him, but they said that this never happened. Stewart said that he did return to the bodies of the bodies of the boys, and he would rub vinegar and butter on the bottom of their feet to disguise the scent from police dogs. He would roll up newspaper and insert it into the anus of the boys' bodies to prevent maggots from entering it, so that he could come back and commit necrophilia with the bodies. Stewart even admitted to going back to Henry's body that morning before he was arrested. And this is why I say, I'm like, why did they release him? Because then he still got this chance to go back and just defile this poor child's body. That's why I'm like, why did they even let him go? Okay, I mean, I understand he had an alibi and they first had to check it out before keeping him, but still, I don't know. They should have gone to Sergeant Norsworthy earlier. He knew. He was like, I know what's up with this guy. Stewart also confessed to other murders that we haven't spoken about, but he took the police to where he was keeping Wuan's body behind a Cape Garden Holiday Inn for 6 months, and this would provide the identity of the body that they had found in May 1996. And the police couldn't identify who the body or who this person was, just that it was a white girl younger than 12 years old. So now they at least had the identity of this body. He also took them to where he was keeping Henry's body, and Henry's body was actually infested with maggots. This was the same body that he was committing necrophilia with, and that just proves like how sick Stewart was. Like, he was still going back. Like, come on. When they took Stewart back to the station, so Stewart had now shown them where he had left these bodies, Sergeant Northworthy said, "I know that there are more bodies." Like, yeah, this man he knows, man. He knows. He's been trained. Stewart confessed that there were at least 10 bodies, right? He then made a full confession to his lawyer, and that's basically what we've been talking about thus far, describing each crime in detail. This confession kept the police busy for quite some time, because they were now trying to connect all these cases, or what we call is murder dockets, not case files, but trying to connect these cases to what Stewart was describing. Before I talk about the trial, which is what we'll conclude with, I just want to talk a little bit about the interviews that Stewart would give over time. Stewart confessed to a whole lot of things, and he also gave the reasoning behind why he would do it. So it's almost like he was fully aware of why he was doing it. And I mean, I guess it made it okay to him in his head. But anyway, he confessed to psychological profiler Gerard Labuschagne and his partner Yanni. I'm sorry, I don't know Yanni's surname, but he spoke to them and he told them practically everything. And I'm sure this is over multiple interviews, but this is the gist of it. He said he committed murder because he experienced sexual abuse as a child, and when he would ask God for help, God wouldn't help him. He wanted to take revenge on God by committing those same crimes that had been committed on him by adults on others. Stewart stated that he wanted to be God. So he wanted to be God. He wanted to be in control and in power. While engaging or raping them and strangling them, they would shout out to God for help, and God wouldn't help them. He would say, "I would fantasize about it. It would make me happy to see them submit. I would say, 'You see, God, I got you.'" I don't know, man. I don't know. It's clear that he was committing these he was raping and murdering because he was violated, and he wanted to be the aggressor now. He wanted to be in control and in power, and that's what it was about for him. From a psychological standpoint, that is definitely what that was about. Whether God was involved or not, only Stewart will know. Only Stewart will know if that's true reasoning as to why he was committing these crimes. At some point, I don't know who he confessed this to, but I found in court documents that it stated that Stewart would drink his ex-girlfriend's period blood. I don't know for what purpose. I don't know why, but he did. His adoptive mother, Mrs. Wilken, also said to Dr. Pistorius, who would later testify in court about Stewart's mental state at the time. She said to Dr. Pistorius that Stewart at one point demanded his adoption papers from Mrs. Wilken so that he could find his birth mother and murder her. I guess like that just gives a little bit of background on, I don't know, what Stewart was fanging on, like what he was doing during this time, like what other weird things he was doing that might have been like red flags, like drinking his ex-girlfriend's period blood, maybe asking for his mother's adoption papers so that he could go murder her. Like that's kind of a red flag. That's kind of like when you maybe as adoptive parent would be like, this person needs help. I don't know. In another interview, Stewart said, so this is about his actual victims. Stewart said, I'm just going to read this: "I would strangle them while having sex. I would go into another world when I am strangling and raping them. When I was strangling them, they would go limp like jellyfish. Made me feel like a king. I had sex with some of their dead bodies. Then I can have ecstasy. Then I can do things the way I wanted to. There's no screaming and chaos. I would fantasize about the murder and masturbate at the body." Stewart enjoyed facing his victims while sodomizing them and while strangling them. According to Dr. Nikki Pistorius, Stewart referred to this as the jelly bean effect. So while he strangled them, their eyes would bulge, their tongue would protrude, and their lips would swell, and this would cause him to ejaculate. So he enjoyed this image. I mean, it's incredibly sad. In 1997, the 3rd of February, Stewart appeared in court. He was initially charged with the murder of Wuan and Henry Baker, but as time passed, more charges got added as the police was connecting the crimes and finding the court dockets to add to his charges. At the end, the final charges were 10 counts of murder and 5 counts of sodomy. In the trial, Dr. Nico Pistorius and Professor Tavai Szabo testified that serial killers in general, and Wilken specifically, cannot be rehabilitated. At a point during the trial, during a trial, these images, these videos of the crime scenes, these pictures of the victims, not really the murder weapon because he strangled them, but evidence is presented in court, and he basically gets to relive the crimes right in front of him. And at one point, Stewart asked to be excused to go to the bathroom, and he indicated to Sergeant Norsworthy that he was going to go masturbate in the bathroom. So all of this is just his fantasy is playing out in front of him. He's watching everything. This is not somebody that feels remorse. So I totally understand why they would say he cannot be rehabilitated. I mean, he's been caught, and he's not saying that he's sorry for what he did. He's just giving an explanation. He's like, but I was trying to get back at God. There's no way that someone like this can be rehabilitated, in my opinion, and obviously in the psychologist and profiler's opinion too. Stewart's defense team, they didn't contest the seven counts of murder and the 2 counts of sodomy charges. But the others, they feel they didn't have enough evidence to prove that Stewart was guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Justice Jansen concurred and found Stewart guilty on 7 counts of murder and 2 counts of sodomy on the 20th of February 1998. This was for the murder of Wuan, Henry Baker, Montefico, and all 4 women. Bye-bye. Stewart was sentenced to 7 terms of life imprisonment. So 7 terms of life imprisonment. Justice Jansen said that Stewart needed to be removed from the community, and that if the death penalty was still available in South Africa, he would have imposed it. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. He even said that when videos were being shown in court, that everybody had to look away because it's gruesome. Everybody looked away, and Stewart just stayed on without any emotion. So this is crazy. So Stewart is going to jail, right? And his wife, so he's still married. He's married to Veronica still. Remember Veronica with the 2 sons? He's still married to her. Veronica came to every court proceeding, and they reconciled. After the sentence was passed and Stewart was read guilty, they spoke for a few minutes, and then they shared a passionate kiss goodbye. Girl. No. No. A passionate kiss. He's guilty. Anyway. So Sergeant Norsworthy, I guess he got I don't know. Maybe he was just really intrigued by Stewart or something, but I couldn't understand this. But Sergeant Norsworthy tracked down Stewart's biological mother, right? And the sister, remember the sister that disappeared? She had actually been reunited with her mother years ago. So this whole time, Stewart's sister was with his mother this whole time. So apparently now he finds Stewart's mother, biological mother, and she learns of all that Stewart has done and committed, and she tells Sergeant Norsworthy to tell Stewart that she still loves him despite learning of what her son had become. Wilken, or Stewart, apparently broke down after hearing this. And when they spoke on the phone, him and his mom, apparently he called her mommy, a name that he could not remember having used is what they wrote. I was like, oh, fuck off. What? Why are you crying? You murdered your own daughter. Like, she can never call you daddy. What? Go to hell. Go to hell. He's currently in St. Albans prison, where he is tormented by the hallucinations and delusions of persecution. He believes that the ghosts of his victims are haunting him. And Dr. Nikki Pistorius, she feels that in the absence of being able to be the aggressor, he has reverted back to being the victim. Just a little strange add-on here, like, okay, that's where Stewart is now. He's gonna maybe live out the rest of his days in prison. We don't know. He did try to appeal. He's been in prison for 25 years now, and I think it was just like two months ago he tried to appeal his sentence, but luckily it was rejected. I don't know when he can again. Not appeal. What is it when you can go and be like, I did 25 years, so can I go now? And then they're like, yes or no. And in this case, it's like, no. Thank goodness. We don't need that kind of energy. He's in his 50s. I think he's like 54 or something. 54. Let me just check. He's 56. He's 56 years old. He's 56 years old. We can't have that man running around. He's being haunted. Like, no. We can't have that man running around. Stay in prison. Stay in jail. Stay there in St. Albans prison. Please remain. Okay. Just a strange little add-on here. Stewart's first wife, Lynn, right? So she's out of the picture. Stewart is out of her life. He murdered her daughter, right? She actually ended up being murdered by a serial killer. That is some incredibly bad luck. Like, that's really sad. That's so sad. Anyway, Stewart has ruined many lives and he deserves to rot in prison. I don't think that he should ever get out. I don't think that he could be rehabilitated. Not if he's being haunted by ghosts. Like, I'm glad he feels guilt, if that's even what it is, or I don't know if he's just mentally ill, but what is he going to do if he gets out? What is he going to do if he gets out? Then he's got a new reason. The devil, maybe. Who knows? First it's God, then it's this, now it's ghosts. No. He belongs in jail. He should remain there and just stay there. 56 years old? You can run at 56. He could run, he can jump, he can do the same things that he did many years ago. Let him live there in prison. That's the case. That's the case of Stewart Wilken. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. So I'm definitely going to be covering mostly South African cases because I don't see them spoken about in this type of fashion, like on YouTube, for instance. So I think I'm going to be covering a whole lot of, I've already got my next one coming. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this and for listening to me, and I really appreciate it. I would love if you would comment down below what you think of Stewart Wilken. Do you think that he did believe that he was getting back at God, or do you think that was just some sort of excuse? Do you think that he is being haunted by the ghosts of his victims, or is he just saying that? I mean, why would he just say that? It's not like it's going to get him out. Or maybe he's trying to get into a psychiatric hospital, you know? There's a little thingy there. Maybe he's trying to get into a psychiatric institution instead of having to sit in jail. I don't know if that's a thing in South Africa. I should actually look that up. What do you think? Do you think that he really believed he was sending his daughter's soul to God? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he's just sick. And he saw an opportunity, a vulnerable person, and he took it. That's what I think. I think he's sick. I don't think he should ever get out. But tell me what you think. I think I've said enough about how I feel. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, a little like. I will be uploading next week again. Before we go, you can go and follow me on Instagram. I'll link my Instagram down below, and I'll also put like a little link here. Or is it here? I don't know how this works yet. This is my first video. This is my first video. I don't think I did that bad. Do you think I did okay? Tell me. Anyway, thank you so much. Have a good week, and I will see you next time.